For this vlog, I will be discussing chapter 19. Chapter 19 discusses the case of a murdered student and basically focuses on a friend of the victim. So first, I'm just going to tell you about the case in this chapter. Before dawn on a March morning, a body was found lying in the street in a university town. The young woman, it turned out, was the university student body president, and she had been shot. Media descended upon the town to cover this apparently random act of violence. Also covering the tragedy were student journalists, including at least one who knew the victim. It's difficult to cover any murder with constant deadlines, devastated friends and family, and ever-changing information from sources that may or may not even be reliable. In this case, the novice reporter faced the additional challenge of balancing his dual roles as a professional journalist and caring friend. So now we're going to get into the situation. But before we get into the situation, I basically see that this will be basically a hard battle between a journalist who was a student who also knew the person who was in the situation. So it was early spring 2008 in Chapel Hill, and students at the University of North Carolina were facing midterms and longing for spring break. Right before the vacation began, news broke that a young woman had been brutally murdered a half a mile from campus. Initial reports said authorities had not yet identified the young woman. Then, the day after the murder, police identified her as 22-year-old Eve Carson, a senior and the university student body president. The town and campus communities were shook. For Adam Rue, a senior broadcast journalism major who also worked part-time as a reporter for the community radio, the murder carried not just news impact but personal impact. He knew Carson from his work covering student government for the journalism school's television station. He had come to consider her as a friend. Like others in the community, he realized that Carson's death was an important story that needed careful attention. But given his friendship with the victim, should he cover the story as a reporter? Because, when there's a conflict of interest, it's kind of hard to report on a story that hits so close to home, especially something so sad as this. So he quickly decided the answer was yes. He thought he could bring an interesting context to the story as a fellow student and one of Eve's friends, despite realizing that a conflict of interest could arise, he said. Eve and I were friends because of our working relationship, not in spite of it. As a reporter for the Carolina Week, a student-produced television news program through the School of Journalism and Mass Communication, he covered stories about the student government, which included considerable contact with its leadership. So he decided that he would proceed with covering this grisly murder, and he said, "I came at it from the perspective of a reporter covering the death of a public figure," he said, which I feel like was a really good, perspective to come about it, because and when you think of it as a public figure, you'll be, soft with the words and make sure not to step on anyone's toes, because when it comes to death and when it comes to someone else's family member, they could then, do anything with that. Say if you did anything to defame the character, they could then sue you for defamation. And there's so much legal trouble that comes with writing about someone who's murdered or someone that you may have known or different things like that. So there was a challenge. Basically, the challenge was handling emotion and getting the story right. Throughout the rest of the chapter, they just go on to tell about how Rue basically writes his story on his friend Carson, and how he tries to basically not include all the details, but include the vital details that would still allow the story to be, told without there being questions about what really happened. So, in addition to Rue gathering reports about the murder from the police and university authorities, he was also among the thousands to attend a campus candlelight vigil in memory of Carson, held the day her identity was discovered. Students, faculty, and individuals from throughout the area descend upon the pit, a heart of the campus. It's a student gathering place. So this highly emotional event was also attended by an onslaught of local and national media. Helicopters flew overhead as cameras and recording devices captured the tribute and the tears of the evening. See, like, in a situation like that, that's a little unnecessary. This is supposed to be something that's, you know, close and dear to home, and that's really heartfelt, and to have helicopters and all that, I feel like that's very unnecessary. So he just goes on to tell us how he covered his story on his friend, and he reflected back on his dual roles of being a student journalism and also a novice freelancer. So overall, I enjoyed this chapter, and that is my thoughts and my breakdown of chapter 19.